The moment Daniel Carter realized he was sitting in the back seat of the wrong car, his heart slammed so hard against his ribs it felt like punishment for daring to hope. The leather beneath him was too soft, the silence too clean, the faint scent of polished wood and money too unfamiliar for a man who usually rode battered buses with grocery bags at his feet. Outside the tinted windows, rain streaked the city of Chicago into blurred lines of gray, and inside, Daniel clutched his worn jacket like a shield, knowing that whatever mistake he had just made was about to cost him far more than embarrassment. If you believe that kindness still matters, that second chances can come when we least expect them, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this exist because people like you still believe in hope. Daniel was a poor single father trying to survive in a city that never slowed down for anyone, least of all a widower with a 7-year-old daughter and overdue rent. Ever since his wife Emily had died from complications after a sudden illness 3 years earlier, life had become a relentless series of compromises. Daniel worked 2 jobs, one as a night janitor at a downtown office building and another doing early morning warehouse shifts whenever his body allowed it. He measured his days in bus transfers and his nights in hours of broken sleep, always listening for the soft cough of his daughter Lily from the next room. Lily was everything he had left of Emily, with her mother's gentle eyes and an asthma condition that made every cold season a quiet terror. Medical bills piled up on the kitchen table like silent accusations, and eviction notices had begun slipping under the door with unsettling regularity. That rainy afternoon, Daniel had rushed out of the hospital where Lily had been treated for a mild asthma flare. He was exhausted, emotionally drained, and distracted by the doctor's warning that another attack could be more serious. The bus stop was crowded, umbrellas colliding, tempers flaring, and when a sleek black limousine pulled up near the curb, Daniel barely registered it. The driver stepped out briefly, apparently to check something at the curbside, and in that brief lapse of attention, Daniel, lost in worry and routine, opened the rear door and slid inside, assuming it was some kind of rideshare he had accidentally ordered during the chaos of the morning. It wasn't until the door closed with a heavy final thud and the quiet wrapped around him like a vault that he realized the truth. This was no bus, no rideshare. This was wealth on wheels. Panic bloomed in his chest as he leaned forward about to apologize and escape when the driver returned and froze. The man was older, composed, with a face shaped by years of professionalism. Instead of shouting or calling security, the driver studied Daniel with an unreadable expression that made the silence heavier than any accusation. What happened next felt unreal, like a scene from a movie Daniel would never normally afford to watch. The driver listened as Daniel stumbled through an explanation, his voice shaking with shame, explaining his mistake, his situation, his intention to leave immediately. But instead of anger, the driver's eyes softened. Something in Daniel's worn face, the hospital wristband still visible on his arm, the quiet desperation that clung to him like rain, seemed to reach the man. The driver explained, calmly and carefully, that the limousine belonged to Jonathan Whitmore, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, a man feared in boardrooms and admired in headlines. Jonathan Whitmore was expected at a high-profile charity gala that evening, an event filled with investors, politicians, and cameras. Then came the words that would change Daniel's life forever. The driver, bound by an unexpected chain of events and a sudden personal emergency of his own, proposed something unthinkable. He asked Daniel to take the CEO's place for the evening, not as a con, not as a thief, but as a stand-in to keep the event from collapsing into scandal. The real CEO, delayed and unreachable due to a private crisis, had entrusted the driver with maintaining appearances at all costs. Daniel's mind screamed that this was madness, illegal, impossible. He was a janitor who still smelled faintly of disinfectant, a father whose shoes had holes in them. But desperation has a way of quieting reason. The promise of a night's pay that could cover Lily's medicine, the driver's solemn assurance that no harm would come to him, and the strange sense that fate had pushed him into that seat all collided at once. By the time the limousine pulled up to the glittering hotel downtown, Daniel was wearing a tailored suit borrowed from the trunk, his hands trembling as rain-soaked city lights reflected off the polished stone entrance. Inside, the gala unfolded like another world. Chandeliers glowed like captured stars, laughter floated over string music, and people spoke in numbers Daniel had only ever seen on overdue bills. He moved through the room stiffly at first, terrified that someone would see through him. But as the evening went on, something unexpected happened. Daniel listened. He listened to stories of donations, of struggling communities, of charities that existed only on paper for tax breaks, and when people asked him questions, he answered honestly, not with corporate jargon, but with the raw truth of a man who knew what hunger felt like, who knew what it meant to pray over a child's hospital bed. His words struck something deep in the room. Investors leaned in, moved by the sincerity they mistook for bold leadership. Board members nodded, impressed by the new direction of compassion they believed their CEO had embraced. Daniel spoke about responsibility not as a brand, but as a moral duty, about wealth as a tool rather than a trophy. He felt Emily's presence with him, like a quiet strength guiding his words, and for the first time in years he felt seen not as a failure, but as a man with something to offer. As the night reached its peak, Daniel learned that the charity at the center of the gala supported children with respiratory illnesses, the same condition that haunted Lily's nights. Overwhelmed, he authorized, in the CEO's name, a donation far larger than planned, one that would fund an entire wing of pediatric care. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by thunderous applause. Daniel's chest tightened with fear at what he had done, but also with a strange, liberating sense of rightness. For once, he had chosen generosity over survival. The truth came out the next morning. News headlines buzzed with confusion, insiders whispered, and Daniel braced himself for consequences he could barely imagine. But instead of punishment, something else arrived at his door. Jonathan Whitmore himself stood there, a tall, imposing figure softened by tired eyes. The real CEO had watched recordings of the gala, listened to every word Daniel had spoken, and recognized something missing in his own life. Rather than anger, Jonathan felt gratitude. He saw in Daniel the humanity he had buried under decades of ambition. Jonathan Whitmore did not expose Daniel. Instead, he offered him a job, not as a mascot or a charity case, but as a consultant for a new foundation dedicated to genuine impact. Daniel's debts were cleared quietly, Lily's medical care fully covered, and a modest home replaced the crumbling apartment they had called shelter. Daniel never forgot where he came from. He carried his past with him like a compass, guiding every decision he made. Years later, Daniel would still ride the bus sometimes, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remember. Remember the rain, the fear, the moment a simple mistake became a doorway to grace. He taught Lily that kindness could change lives, that humility was strength, and that even the most powerful transformations could begin with an accident. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that hope can arrive in the most unexpected ways, please take a moment now to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who may need them most. And before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with one word that this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. Daniel's life was never about becoming a CEO. It was about becoming whole again, about learning that sometimes God places us in unfamiliar seats not to test us, but to remind us of who we truly are.